Welcome to All Villa, No Filler. Please like and subscribe below. Now, Sevilla's famous sporting director Monchi has been linked by a number of media reports to a move to Aston Villa. Today, I'm joined by Ruairidh Barlow, who is editor at Football España, to find out more. So, Ruairidh, what's the latest on Monchi and his current relationship with Sevilla?
Yeah, I mean, Monchi's he's obviously had a very close relationship with Sevilla over the years, but in recent months and the last 12 months, it's been a hectic, it's been a tiring, exhausting year at Sevilla. I mean, this is a side that has just won the Europa League, but that last 2 months of the season under Jose Luis Mendilibar is it is really kind of put some gloss over what has been a really tough season at Sevilla. I mean, they started off with Julen Lopetegui. He was sacked after 3 months into the season. They appointed Jorge Sampaoli. He was sacked again in late March because they were still concerned that they were going to be in a relegation battle. Monchi himself has been under fire a lot in the last kind of 12 months. This is a guy who's been lauded universally across Spain as one of the architects of Sevilla's success in the last 20 years. But some poor recruits last summer really did kind of put the focus on him. The fact that he backed Lopetegui, things didn't go well again after 3 very successful years, it should be said, but things did not go well at the start of the season this year. There were scenes of him kind of talking to the fans in the stands, telling them to stick with the team, telling them to keep coming to the games and kind of giving them their support. So yeah, it's been a really intense kind of 12 months. And the latest is that Monchi's having a period of reflection. He has told Sevilla that he wants to leave the club, reportedly, it should be said, citing exhaustion, citing mental kind of fatigue, essentially. Sevilla have denied him the chance to go. Again, this is all reported by the likes of Marca Diario AS. This is what's in the papers, at least. Sevilla have denied him the chance to go unless he pays his release clause, essentially, which is a year of his salary. I think it'll be somewhere between 2 and 5 million euros, depending on what you read. And Sevilla president Jose Castro has come out on Friday night and said that we want Monchi to stay, but that he needs to give us a decision now. This has come as a bit of a shock to us. It's something that we weren't expecting. And relations between Castro and Monchi are not 100%, shall we say. So yeah, it's a tough period at Sevilla from their point of view. The reason that they think that Monchi wants to leave is this interest from Aston Villa, interest from Spurs as well have also been linked. Obviously, they lost their sporting director, Paratici, a couple of months ago. So yeah, Sevilla think that Monchi wants to try something new, wants to go to the Premier League. Monchi, at least publicly or privately, but leaked to the public, is not saying that. And yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it goes. Monday is the date that Sevilla have said apparently that they want an answer by.
Okay, so Monday's the day to look for it. It sounds like. I did a piece on Monchi for our own channel the other day. Because I followed La Liga for a very long time. But what I said is that when I think back to the early days of La Liga, I think when I started following them in like 2000, I think of Deportivo La Coruña, Jaminho, I think of Hector Cooper, Valencia, Guy Mendieta, even John Carew, Villa player as well. I think of things like that, but I don't think of Sevilla. Because Sevilla, when I first started watching it, were in the Segunda Division. So, there was no real guarantee that Sevilla would then go on a few years later to become this sort of very dominant Europa League team that seemingly wins it all the time and is regularly competing in the top 4 in Spain as well. So, how big a part did Monchi play in Sevilla establishing themselves as a team that everybody now thinks of as a real European giant?
Yeah, I mean, look, every success, every victory, every kind of tournament win has a number of people involved. It's an effort of players, it's an effort of managers, backroom staff, presidents, directors, everything. But if you were to put an offer at the top of the list of all these successes, then Monchi's would have to be there. I mean, he's been there for 21 of the 23 last years. They came up from Segunda with him. They started in Segunda and gave kind of the keys to Monchi. He wasn't expecting it at the time, but he developed a system. He developed an entire kind of recruitment kind of plan and coverage for Sevilla, and very much so in those early days in kind of 2005 to kind of 2015. They were the sides that were recruiting from Brazil, from Argentina, getting in young talents before the big clubs were. They've had to kind of shift strategy a little bit because the scouting networks from other sides have become a lot more kind of impressive and far-reaching. But yeah, Monchi is very much the lead architect of their success. Without Monchi, it's fair to say that none of this probably happens in Sevilla. Big club still. I mean, they have a 40,000 seater stadium, so I mean they're obviously large, but it's fair to say that they're probably not going to be talked about or even kind of a European force. So yeah, he is in terms of track record, I'd say few sporting directors in the world can lay claim to what he's done at Sevilla.
Yeah, and sort of what kind of business does he like to do? Is he, he tends to, I know Sevilla have produced a lot of really great youth players in the last 15 years. I think of Sergio Ramos, Jesus Navas, Brian Hill, a more recent one. And then also the signings he makes, kind of players that might not be at their peak that they can then sell on for bigger fees. Is that kind of how he approaches his business? Is that how he likes to structure a club, I guess?
Yeah, all of this happens in the context of the fact that Sevilla, without being necessarily short of money at all times, they're never going to be kind of competing with the big boys. So Sevilla's recruitment strategy has been, young players who have not yet reached their potential, try and bring them in, sell them on for bigger fees. Also, you see players that perhaps have been discarded by kind of the Premier League or kind of giants like Real Madrid, Barcelona, the Serie A, kind of big 3 or 4 teams there. Teams that are not necessarily using their resources properly, and Monchi will try and kind of latch onto that and bring in those players. And then more recently, I think, especially under Julen Lopetegui preferred to bring in kind of veteran players rather than necessarily kind of younger players that they can sell on for big value. And that's been part of the problem over the last kind of over the last 2 years at Sevilla, is that generally they rely on those sales to kind of keep them going and to give them the chance to reinvest that money and bring in those younger players. But Jules Koundé and Diego Carlos left. That was a good 85, 90 million into their bank. But outside of that, they've really not had the chance to make kind of major sales in recent seasons. And that kind of more veteran movement through the side has been a problem for Sevilla. And it's why you see, even though they were very successful winning the Europa League, but it's why you see a side that has Ivan Rakitic and Fernando Regis in midfield. And a lot of people were looking at when they were doing poorly and saying, why have we got kind of 2 kind of mid-30-year-olds in midfield? Jesus Navas is obviously 37. It's now become an aging side in recent years.
Okay, and it's worth mentioning players he has signed in the past. Even Rakitic, €2 million, I think he got, in 2011. Dani Alves, the Barcelona Adriano, who then went and played for Adriano, not the Inter Adriano. I think of lots of players he's sort of plucked out, I guess, over the years.
Yeah.
But he hasn't always been at Sevilla. I mean, he's a name that I always identify with Sevilla, but I was really shocked in 2017 when he went to Roma, just because, just thinking of him not in that Sevilla environment was quite surprising. And to think of him going to a very different league that he'd never been involved with. And so he was there from 2017 to 2019, and it wasn't really seen as a major success. Can you sort of explain kind of what went wrong there?
Yeah, there's a number of things. I mean, obviously, I think people at Roma will have different views on this, and they will have kind of what they think of it. It's probably a little bit more accurate than what I can give you. But from kind of an outside level, Monchi at Sevilla until recently, and this is part of the reason he's considering leaving, I think, is because he's partially lost a bit of power in the decision making at Sevilla. And that's partly why relations have broken down. But Monchi has always had kind of universal power almost at Sevilla because, I mean, he has been so good. He's earned it. He deserves that power in a certain sense. But he goes to Roma, a club that is very much, it's a massive club. It has its structures in place. It has a lot of powerful people kind of within and around the club, which call the shots, which, make big decisions. And Monchi was the one that essentially said, it's time to move on Francesco Totti. So from the very start, you're kind of on the back foot trying to move on a club legend like Totti, who is next to Roma, kind of the next biggest thing in Rome. So Totti, I mean, Raja Nainggolan, he tried to move him on as well. So I think Monchi has always had kind of the power and the backing to more or less move as he sees fit and make the moves that he wants to. Whereas at Roma, they had a number of big players. They had a number of kind of players that had a lot of backing from the fans that didn't necessarily see things the same way. And so I think relations broke down very early. You bring in Luis Enrique, who is a very good coach by all accounts, and we've seen how successful he's been, but he's also a very kind of strong personality. The two of them both are very kind of headstrong. They like to do things their way. And if it's not their way, then you're out, basically. And so two characters come into a club that very much has its own tradition, has its own structure, its own culture. They try and change that culture. They try and impose themselves on it. And I think Monchi has said, look, I made mistakes. There's things that I wouldn't do again. And there's things that, yeah, I got wrong there. So Monchi has definitely grown from that. He's definitely learned from that. And yeah, one of the things I find interesting is he did an interview just before the Europa League final two, and he said, he was asked, do you think you'd ever move abroad again? I mean, it wasn't on the cards, it wasn't reported at any point. And he said, look, like, I'm happy at Sevilla, but I have a few ideas in my head. So the fact that he didn't outright deny it a few weeks before the Europa League final makes me think that sooner or later he will consider going abroad if the circumstances are right.
Right. And since you returned to Sevilla in 2019, how have the club performed, would you say, considering where they were when he came back in?
Yeah, I mean, the 2 years where Monchi left did not go well, to put it very, very bluntly. They had a succession of managers that didn't work out. They had, a number of dodgy deals. And so Monchi was, again, partly on the back foot. He was trying to right the ship when he came in. And he absolutely did that. I mean, he brought in Julen Lopetegui, a man who was very much a pariah in the Spanish media at that point. He had left the Spain job just before the World Cup to join Real Madrid. That didn't go well. That failed after kind of 3-4 months. So he brings in Lopetegui, gives him the power to kind of do what he wants with the side. And they go on to make 3 top 4 finishes in a row. That's the first time since the 1960s that had happened. They go on to win another Europa League. And that very much is credit down to Monchi, and some of the players that he brought in there were very good. But as we've said, it contrasted with the model that they'd been approaching previously. So the younger players that they'd brought in, the likes of, I think it was Quincy Promise, I think it was Isiati. There was 2 or 3 younger players that they brought in, Ronnie Lopez, another one from Monaco, that didn't really work out. And those were the players that needed to play kind of a bigger role in the team for that strategy to work. And you got to a situation this season where you had a manager at the end of his cycle who Monchi continued to back, and eventually it was the club, not Monchi, that sacked him. That was something that didn't go down too well with Monchi. And this season was a complete disaster until April, basically. So over those 4 years, you'd have to say it's probably an A-. Monchi has done a fantastic job, but in those last kind of 12 months, certainly he struggled to bring in the right players. Sevilla struggled to get the right results, and his decisions certainly were at the heart of the reasons that they did struggle this season.
And so, Aston Villa, I guess, are kind of a natural link in the sense that he has worked with Unai Emery before, 3 years together, 3 Europa Leagues in a row. Just feels like every year Sevilla win it. But look, I mean, 3 Europa Leagues in a row is an absolutely incredible achievement. Do you think there's an appeal there? Did they have I'd said they've won 3 trophies in a row, but they had a successful spell together at Sevilla, right?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, Ivan Rakitic, as you mentioned, probably up there with the highlights of the Sevilla deals that he's ever done, and he was a main part of that. He captained the side to one of them. Unai Emery and Monchi are close. They have a good friendship beyond kind of their footballing philosophy. And I think, they gel well together. I think they work well together. I mean, Monchi has worked with quite a few Basque managers now and got good results. And you could say that's down to Monchi picking the right people, or just the fact that Basque managers are very good at the moment. But yeah, so Monchi and Emery, I think they go hand in glove. They're very much along the same lines. And I think if they were to work together again, certainly on the face of it, from the previous evidence that we have, there's no reason to suggest that they wouldn't be highly successful again. And I mean, listen, I've mentioned those kind of last 12 months at Sevilla and the struggles that they've had. But overall, if you're Aston Villa and you bring Monchi in, there's got to be a few doubts. There's got to be things that can go wrong. But on the whole, you have to be delighted with the fact that Monchi would be coming to your club. I mean, Monchi is there's few people, as I said, that have done better in the last 20 years at his job in the world. So yeah, he is in terms of track record, he is at the top of the game.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that, Ruairidh. That's been a very informative take on Monchi, and we'll keep our eyes and ears out for Monday to see exactly what goes on. But Ruairidh, thanks again for coming on. I love chatting to you about football and La Liga. And so can you just tell us where we can find you and your work online?
Yeah, if you want to keep across the Monchi saga and many more that are going to come this summer in Spain, go to Football España, follow them at Football España _ on Twitter, and myself at Ruairidh Barlow, Rui Barlow, on Twitter as well, and I'll be posting my work there too.